Hello, Brav. We're back with Ernie, Hemingway's sister. Sonny Remembers by Madelaine Hemingway Miller. We move to the chapter 6, Indians. About 1/2 mile east of our cottage, there was an Indian camp, and since Dad, a doctor, had taken care of these lumber camp Indians gratis each year, we knew a number of the Indians quite well. Nick Bolton, his son Richard, Ernie's and my friend, and Prudence Bolton, Rich's sister. Prudence was not good looking, but a good sport, and she tagged along with her brother sometimes, as I did with mine. Though some scholars hint there was something between them, I never saw any evidence of Ernie's liking her or even wanting her along on our exploring trips or squirrel hunting jaunts. Stories. Then there was Billy Gilbert and his family, Billy Mitchell, and Billy Tabeshaw. Ernie was always particularly interested in anything Indian. We loved to watch any of the lumbering projects that went on. Many times we were in the way, of course, when shouts of timber were heard, and the Indians pleaded with us to get on home, out of the way of danger. It was also a fine thing to see the Indian women at work on their baskets and artifacts. They used sweet grass and porcupine quills very artistically. The women often came walking down to the cottages on a Sunday all dressed up, selling their baskets. The men of the camp had great regard for our father. He prescribed for them often, and they appreciated his many kindnesses and ability, as did the people in the surrounding countryside and lake area. We even loved the smell of the Indian camp. The odor of their camping grounds remained in the area for a few years after they had all pulled out. One time, Rich Bolton, Ernie, and I went exploring in the woods past the Indian camp. It was a long, hot walk, but I kept up to those two fellows so as to get in on their conversation. They talked about our nature findings along the way, fungi, tree moss on the south side of the trees, fishing, hunting, and stretching animal skins. Each shared his teachings from his father's knowledge. When they started to talk about girls, Ernie told me to lay back. We want to talk private. They didn't shut me out often, only once in a while, so I understood. We came to a nice cold stream, and kneeling, I dipped my whole head in to cool off. I told Dad about that, and he said that was the worst thing I could have done. Just a little cold water on the forehead is safer when you are overheated. Dad looked at us with every ailment, and his word was law. He was very interested to learn what we had located of interest on our tramp through the woods, and no doubt retraced our steps to check our findings later. His powers of observation were unique. In the Petoskey area, for many years, a group of Indians came from Garden River, Canada, to portray Longfellow's Hiawatha. The pageant was held at Round Lake, north of the city, at a place we called Wayagama. We sat on bleachers facing the small lake. Behind the bleachers, the railroad tracks ran by on up to Mackinaw City. Coming into Petoskey on the dummy train from Walloon Village after boating down to the village was quite a trip in those days, and we were always impressed by magical enactment of Hiawatha, especially when the young Indian dove from the high man-made cliff and later sailed off into the sunset. Dad's visiting Indian, Albert Wabanosa from Canada, told us his grandfather had been Longfellow's guide when he gathered background for Hiawatha. He was an expert canoe maker and, of course, an expert paddler. He promptly showed Ursula and me the fine points of handling a canoe. We were taught the different strokes the stern paddler uses to sheer the canoe and shown how to paddle standing up and kneeling. Standing was often the way to reach shore when a quick squall came up and you were alone in the canoe. Balance was essential, and he praised us both for our ability to adapt to it. We learned to feather our paddles expertly and could sneak up on picnic groups that took over the point nearby in such favorite spots that we'd come to feel were our very own. Squatters' rights, we called it. We slept on the point about 1/4 mile from our home many nights, making beds in the open from cedar boughs. A fire to keep porcupines and skunk and other wildlife away cheered us on to storytelling and plain truth. And that's the end of that more interesting story than the last. Goodbye, Robs. Goodbye.